and our project is on judicial affairs, presented by Moana and Moana. So just giving a brief history. First of all, Judicial Affairs started out as they took an approach as far as discipline. So that was one of the things that they emphasized. Also, the president actually was the conduct hearing officer for most universities until the 1800s. A sudden change happened. So basically, the president, a lot of more broad things, as far as like conduct situations happened that was more complex and which resulted in the president's need help. So that's when we created our first dean of men and women, which were student affairs professionals. Also, with that being said, student affairs is all about helping skills. That was in the reading. And also, so basically, we took the approach of educating the student and also disciplining them, so it was basically like a learning experience. And that has actually been, we emphasize that in conduct cases at St. Thomas, which I am a conduct hearing officer. So basically, institutions actually created judicial systems with the balance of educating and discipline students.
Okay, so we need a person to come up and be a volunteer for the discipline where we use the actual discipline. We're not going to do that. How they started out though. It's come a long ways, and in judicial affairs, it's not necessarily about the discipline. It is about educating the student, and that was kind of that transition Jeremiah was talking about, where the role of a anyone in judicial affairs is to look at prevention ways they can reach students, so any way they can kind of help build them as the whole person, and any way they can kind of be proactive about making sure that they won't. Of course, these sort of issues are going to come up, and so you do, as a judicial officer or a conduct officer or dean of students, have to sometimes process referrals and impose sanctions, and it can get worse. However, you always try to take the route first of preventing these kind of things and helping that. It also really depends. We've had the privilege of interviewing people from a wide variety of universities, and it so depends where you're at. Like MCTC looks significantly different than St. Mary's University, a small liberal arts. I think it was like 1,500 students. So in Winona.
And also St. Thomas, with a campus with residence life, it can be it can look definitely different because we have campus housing, so a lot of similar kind of cases come up on campuses such as that. So can we get yes?
Yeah, Charlotte.
Hi,
Charlotte.
Okay.
I want you to read it.
So
you can stand up.
Okay. I am an undergraduate resident in a first-year hall. My friend and I were having a few drinks, and we started to be loud. A resident assistant heard us while completing a round and suspected that we'd been drinking. The RA called public safety to request a PDT test, and I blew a .06. Public safety then transported me to the hospital for further care, and the incident was documented by both Res Life staff and public safety.
Thank you, Charlotte. We have one more. Jack Wes, would you read it? This
Sure,
second incident.
I had a term paper due and put it, this would be perfect, right? I had a term paper due and put it off until the last minute. I decided to utilize a previous paper I had completed from the year before. It was my own work after all. Unfortunately, my professor turned it in, and my paper was detected 50% plagiarism. My professor gave me a failing grade and reported me to the student conduct and integrity.
So basically, those two conduct cases are basically typical conduct cases that conduct hearing officers normally hear. So basically, I know that for like the drinking situation, that is more likely to happen at like St. Thomas or a big university such as like the U and things like that. So I want to say from the community college standpoint, that's where the plagiarism happens and things like that. So basically, as being a conduct hearing officer, actually I heard a case today, such as drinking. So basically, I've actually had some experience of adjudicating conduct cases. So one of the things that I try to do as a conduct hearing officer is basically reviewing the incident. So basically, I have the idea of going into the situation, and also I actually have the student assign due process rights. So basically, students have rights to actually that are outlined in a form and things like that. So it tells them that they have the opportunity to appeal and things like that. Also, I meet with the student and I also apply like the helper skills. So basically ask them what's actually going on, because we also have students who are dealing with mental health illnesses and things like that. So that's one of the things I ask them how to transition and things like that. So also I also get a background of the incident. So I actually ask them their perspective of the story, because also I think that their opinion is definitely valuable in that situation. Also, I explain the charges that's going on, that's held against them, and I also give them that opportunity to sign and admit what do they want to take ownership for. And basically, we talk through it and things like that, and I make a decision. Based off the sanctions I assign to them, then I follow up. So I know in the drinking case, it's an $80 fine and an alcohol court. So that's something that I deal with. I actually heard one today. So awesome. So I know that this was something that was really interesting to me, because based on institution, there's different rules and regulations that we have to follow. So not only do we have federal, we also have state and local institutional laws that we have to follow. So I know coming from Indiana State University, where I'm undergrad at, it was really, really different, because I know that if a student is caught drinking or whatever the case may be, and they were transported to the hospital, we can't involve the parent definitely if they're 18, which it should be 18. If so, that's kind of violating confidentiality of the student. Here at St. Thomas, on the other hand, we actually notify the parents that they're being transported. So that's really, really an eye-opening thing for me. And yeah.
And then in terms of the academic integrity, one of the things that we heard from MCTC was just that as they always have commuter students, and then at the private St. Mary's where I spoke with, the more commuter students you have, the more your percentages of dealing with academic integrity are more of an issue. And you're just looking at the changing demographics of student populations, and there's more of the commute. That is going to be a higher issue to deal with, just simply because of the numbers. You don't have as many people living there. You don't have as many of the drinking kind of things to deal with. Okay, and so one of the other things, particularly my conversation with MCTC, mental health issues has become almost at a crisis point for them. And they said part of developing the whole student, and something happens. I mean, she gave me all kinds of very disturbing things that have happened, but a lot of times it comes down to the individual is not well and needs help beyond any sort of conduct. They need to get counseling resources, or they need to have dependency issues. And so one of the things they try to do together with giving some sort of disciplinary action is supporting that student in what he or she might need. And so that's kind of just a big piece. Then we have one of the big laws when you're looking at student conduct is that from what Jeremiah was saying, after you go through that initial process, and they give a consequence, a student has the right to appeal it. And so when you get to kind of more serious things, does anyone have any ideas of more serious stuff that might happen on a campus?
I can actually step in and just say I want to say rape. That's a huge thing that the people who normally appeal, such as from a male, involve a male and a female. So I know that say for instance a little bit more severity. So it's probably we like to be the students hearing it versus I want to say a resident staff member based on the severity. So that's the example.
So basically, then there'll be a hearing, and it's kind of, you might have the opportunity at your institutions to be a part of that hearing committee. It would be kind of very interesting. They gather faculty, staff, and students, usually three, at least at the two institutions I talked to, 3 of them are specifically trained for that position, and they hear it, and then it's kind of like a jury, but they don't like to use the real judicial language. And so they either uphold charge or change it, or the student is exonerated. At that point, if the student still disagrees, then they have the right to bring it to the court. They contact the Attorney General's office. They subpoena the student's records, and they usually, the student contacts officer will represent the institution, and they'll make a recommendation to the president of the university as to whether if the student should be expelled or what should happen.
So basically, like we mentioned, a lot of students face like mental health issues and things like that, and some of the things are not really noticeable. Basically, you can be dealing with students who don't take their meds and things like that. So I know I met with the dean of students, Jim Stacks, at St. Thomas, and he told me that he has dealt with a lot of people who have mental health issues, and also that can be really different when dealing with students like that, because student affairs practitioners, we don't really have, most programs, some programs don't have like counseling and things like that, so that can be really, really different. So I know we don't have a counseling course here, so that can be different for me trying to relate to people in that sense.
How many of you, if there was a crisis situation right now, knows what to do for St. Thomas, their emergency procedure? And this is, okay, so think about that. I've got two, both who we know are in res life. Someone else has been there. So when we look at our second one, public safety and behavioral intervention, unfortunately, events like in Virginia and then just last week in Oregon, there has been a response to that, and they've implemented behavioral intervention teams to try to address the situation before it happens, but also developing a plan if something, horrible like that would ever happen. And clearly, even in this group who knows a lot about college affairs, doesn't know what to do. So that's a concern. And then just how important it is, Becky at MCTC told me how it's often when there, a consequence is given, the student will lash out at her, and she just had to learn how to not take it personally. She has been called many names, and she's like, this has nothing to do with me. This is all about you. So.
And also I mentioned about being knowledgeable of federal and state and institutional laws as well. So we're gonna just start with a little bit of rewards that we heard out of some of our interviewees' mouths.
So basically, one of the things is when you're dealing with some of these bigger issues, a lot of times they said the reward was almost that much greater because it's such a big moment in the student's life that they're intimately a part of what happens and how it is resolved. And so Chris, Kendall, and both Stephanie Lucas Waver, both at St. Mary's, were just felt so privileged to get to know the students well. And Stephanie talked about how she could see the physical change in people who are really making differences.
And also, just to touch on both of them, I know that Jim Sachs mentioned about the love of student interaction, and also Pam Brosick talked about the opportunity to educate faculty, because I know that's a big part as well, because most people don't know how to address situations like that, because everybody don't have the residence-like background or the counseling background.
Okay, and we're gonna have you guys try to find some things in the brochure, but before we do, are there any questions for us specifically about how Judicial Affairs works?
Let's do a minute and a half of this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we still have.
Yes,
okay,
you're good.
Okay, you're good. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
So basically, I just want to ask this question: when did the idea of developing the whole student emerge?
It is found in your brochure.
Gauge
Make
me
sure you
hungry.
read it.
Yay!
Allison, you're not a star. Oh.
And also, what was one of the big? What is one of the biggest issues in judicial affairs today? Yay!
Nancy. I thought I apologized.
And last but not least, what are the three characteristics that professionals in judicial affairs need?
Empathetic, open-minded, set clear boundaries.
Like a polite person.
Okay, and that's our presentation.
Nice guys finished last, Caitlin.
So are there any questions? Now we'll do some questions. Yeah.
What kind of schooling or training would someone wanting to be in this profession be like? Do they do student affairs or higher ed?
Jeremiah's background is going to be great because he's criminal. Help me out here.
Criminology or criminal justice.
Yes. When I first started looking for interviews interviews and I was Googling random people, there were like a ton of lawyers that kept coming up. And a lot of times the conduct officers are in fact in law. And so usually it's kind of an alternative route that you could get into some of these judicial affairs.
And also, I know that a lot of people, like such as Jim Sachs, he actually has a JD. So also that's really, really different because he looks at things for the law situation. He also mentioned a lot of his frustrations, like dealing with student affairs professionals, because we are all about helping skills and things like that. And he doesn't feel like that's really, really, I guess, beneficial. So I know that one of the things that I don't like is, actually finding people, finding like, I guess, get the $80 that I mentioned. And he believes that as an adult that you have to pay prices, so I guess that's where that concept comes from. And also, you got people who will go in counseling, but now I know that a lot of people who are in conduct are student affairs professionals, and that's what I want to be. So.
Yeah, but they said residence life is a great way to do a lot of mediation. That can kind of lead you on that path. Anyone who's in a different functional area, though, good thing to do is get on that appeals committee and be a part of that because they are looking for people, generally speaking, and they will allow you to join that.
And I know some this is last week. And I know that a lot of some entry level jobs are student conduct officers, sexual violence prevention. Where's Laura? Here. Yeah. And also I know a lot of conduct happens in residence life as well, because we're babysitting people's kids. So that just kind of happens. But other than that, I just think that
Any other? Yeah, Alison.
So I feel like this is probably going to be a pretty common thing, budget constraints have affected a lot of departments. Did any of your folks that you talked to say how it's affected judicial affairs?
I can kind of say that I know when talking to Pam, she did mention that we have to be in compliance with I guess federal and state and institutional laws in order to get certain funds. So I guess if that's answering your question, she did mention
Well,
that.
I know in their mental health being one of the biggest issues, they said a lot of times what students need is counseling discipline, for lack of a better word, or rehabilitation or education, and their counselors are swamped. And so they're running into issues that way because that's how they're supposed to, so they'll send them to outside sources, and a lot of times they're saying, yes, the student is fit to return, but they need regular counseling. And so dealing with that, with the limited number of counselors is one of the biggest, in terms of budgets, I'd say. Yeah, there's only so many needs. Yeah, Laura.
You talked about the due process rights that students have. Is that something that is different by institutions, or do students have legal rights?
I will say that I would say both in a way, but I know that just for, like I said, we have to be in compliant and just institutional and stuff like that. And it's kind of one of those things that you just want to, kind of cover your butt in a way. And like I said, if you're the conduct hearing officer, it's kind of your word against theirs. So, you want to actually, it's kind of like a person in jail, and you're going through the process. It's basically like that. I would kind of relate it to, but yeah.
In my experience, it depends on the institution. I worked at 2 institutions that didn't have that practice and one that did. So it depends on the institution.
And MCTC was she named off a million laws for me.
So and for me, is that part of the conversation with the student? That part varies. The rights of the student don't necessarily.
Right, they have the right to, you cannot deny student education unless there's, cause, and so then there's the privacy laws that come into play a lot too, through FERPA.
And just a fun fact, when you are hearing conduct cases, make sure you don't persuade them to admit to it. That was one of the things that I did when I first did my first conduct case. I was kind of I was explaining it to them, but I was kind of hey, not intentionally telling them hey, you did this and things like that. And that was some feedback I got from my supervisor. So I got better at that. So yeah, you want to make them, let them think about what they did and fully admit to it.
Right.
Would this position do a lot of collaboration with, say, a Title IX coordinator?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Title IX violations would be.
But Title IX is not an entry-level position. It's more most people, I guess, for the qualifications that I looked at, you have to be have a JD or at the least a master's.
Well, it depends on the smaller institutions. It seems like you take a more traditional, or you could do student affairs routes. If you're going to be a really big state run like U of M
concern.